What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you for joining me. This is episode 37 of Hockey on the Spot. And for today's episode, just going to talk about some of the things that have happened over the past couple of days around the league, considering there was no video yesterday. So, because of the Jewish holiday, which I hope everyone had a good Rosh Hashanah. Um, so for today, we're just going to talk about some of the things that have happened since our last video. Um, Including a couple more training camp invites. The San Jose Sharks have already invited Kyle Wellwood to training camp, as we mentioned last time. His younger brother, Eric Wellwood, along with Anthony Stewart, are also going to be attending training camp for the San Jose Sharks. Anthony Stewart was a part of the Los Angeles Kings last year, though he never played a game last year. And then Eric Wellwood has been one of the top prospects for the Philadelphia Flyers for a couple of years. So good to see the Wellwood brothers united. And Anthony Stewart, older brother of Chris Stewart of the St. Louis Blues, has not done anything to live up to his expectations. Has basically proven himself as a one-hit wonder, and that was in 2010, 2011 with the Atlanta Thrashers, but can still prove to be a very valuable depth player. In other news, the Calgary Flames are going to be having a new general manager. Brian Burke, who had been working part-time for the Anaheim Ducks, will now be the GM of the Calgary Flames, and Jay Feaster will demote himself to assistant GM, so he will still be with the team, but it's usually stuff like this that usually means that eventually he's going to leave. So we'll see what happens with that. And I think it's a good move for the Calgary Flames. They are rebuilding, so they absolutely need someone who's going to help with that rebuild. He rebuilt the Anaheim Ducks and has basically rebuilt the Toronto Maple Leafs as well. So we'll see what happens with that. Also, goaltender Mika Kiprusoff, we assumed was going to retire this year, and it still is very possible. However, now there have been some possibilities that he may change his mind and actually play the final year of his contract, and they are hoping he does because, let's face it, they really don't have a goalie right now. Kari Ramo and Rito Berra are basically the goaltenders, and those guys are unproven. They are very unproven. So we'll see what happens there. Maybe hoping that a guy like Mika Kiprusoff can come back an extra year and play. If not, they may have to go after a guy like Ilya Brizgalov or Jose Theodore or Tim Thomas. We'll never know. We'll see what happens. And also want to recap some of the new uniforms that have come into the NHL this year. We've mentioned them before. We're going to recap them as well. The Carolina Hurricanes, Dallas Stars, and San Jose Sharks are all getting completely new uniforms for this year. The Minnesota Wild will get new road jerseys for this year, and the Buffalo Sabres will have new third uniforms as well. We've been hearing lots of complaints about the new Buffalo jerseys. Personally, though, I don't think they're that bad, but that's just my opinion. However, some Olympic teams have also gotten some new jerseys for this year. Canada, Russia, and the United States. Russia's new uniforms are awesome. The United States and Canada, however, are basically just are not good by any stretch. I do not like the new U.S. jerseys, and I think the new Canada jerseys are even worse. The new Canada jerseys will basically be the joke of the 2014 Winter Olympics. So we'll see how that turns out. Also, in other news, the St. Louis Blues, as we all know, still have not been able to get a contract done with Alex Pietrangelo. So, in the meantime, the Blues have occupied themselves with a new training camp invitee, defenseman Ryan Whitney, who played for the Edmonton Oilers the past few years, coming over from the Edmonton Oilers. I think it's a good move by the St. Louis Blues, even though he is a guy who has been getting hurt a lot in the past couple of years. When he's healthy, has one of the biggest shots among defensemen. When he does take the shot, there obviously sometimes is shown that he is afraid to take that shot sometimes. But he is a very good player, an offensive defenseman who makes an excellent first pass, a big guy, and again, that big shot from the point is feared throughout the league. So, a good guy for the Blues to get, because if they don't get Pietrangelo signed, they will need a power play quarterback, and Ryan Whitney could be that guy. And of course, some other guys without some contracts still. Marcus Johansson from the Washington Capitals. They absolutely need him. We haven't talked much about that. We'll talk a bit about it now. They absolutely need him. He's a very good playmaker. He's a very, very valuable part of their team. Moved from center to left wing last year, and he's one of their more valuable left wingers. Could play on basically any of the top 3 lines. He'll do whatever you ask him to. Also, in other news, Dan Cleary looks as if he is basically practicing with the Detroit Red Wings and still wishes to sign with the Red Wings. Personally, I don't see how that's going to get done, but there are other teams that are interested in a veteran player like him, including the Anaheim Ducks, the Philadelphia Flyers, and the Pittsburgh Penguins. He was met personally by Sidney Crosby to try to convince him to come over. But this is a solid two-way forward who I think could be good for any one of these 3 teams. And again, he is a bit older, so he'll also add some of that veteran cup experience to whatever team he goes to. Danny Cleary, very good player. Probably maybe the biggest news also, Alex Ovechkin has been been attempted to try to be lured into the Continental Hockey League. They've confronted Alex Ovechkin to try to get him to leave the Washington Capitals and get him to go over to the KHL. He luckily has turned that offer down, at least for now. So that's pretty good. Another restricted free agent who we haven't talked much about, Cody Hodgson, who the Buffalo Sabres still need to get signed. He's one of the better young players in the National Hockey League, and he's really developing himself into a top 6 forward, and the Buffalo Sabres really need him. Honestly, to this day, I'm still questioning why the Vancouver Canucks even made such a trade with the Buffalo Sabres. Don't get me wrong, I think Zach Kassian is a very good player, but I think Cody Hodgson is just a step better. And he's really shown that with the Buffalo Sabres. So I think they definitely need to get him signed very soon. They absolutely need to get him signed very soon. In other news, defenseman Thomas Kaberle, who at one point was one of the star offensive defensemen in the National Hockey League, has signed with HC Kladno of the Czech Extraliga. However, he also has an out clause in case he ever gets offered an NHL contract. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if he did get offered an NHL contract to come back and play in the NHL. A lot of people say that maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs would get him back, that they really didn't want to lose him in the first place. But again, he's not the same player as he used to be, so we'll see how that goes down. Joni Pitkanen will be having a CAT scan, had a CAT scan on his heel yesterday, and it's very, very possible that could be a career-ending injury for Joni Pitkanen, which is a shame. He absolutely was their best blue liner, especially as far as playmaking goes. He had great offensive two-way abilities. But again, he hasn't been healthy a full day the past few years, and he would be missed by the Carolina Hurricanes. And I honestly like Joni Pitkanen. That's not only a loss for them, it's also a loss for Team Finland, as he would have been one of their more valuable blue liners. But now that extra money that the Hurricanes have that they wanted to use to get Brendan Morrow will now have to go after a defenseman if, of course, this is the end for Joni Pitkanen. And the guy that they would be going after, no question whatsoever, is defenseman Ron Hainsey from the Winnipeg Jets. Ron Hainsey, again, not as good as Joni Pitkanen, but he's still a solid offensive-minded defenseman, a depth player. He hasn't really shown that great offensive ability of his in the past few years. It's been a while since he's been that player. But if by some chance he can get back to the form he was in the beginning of the 2008-2009 campaign with the Atlanta Thrashers, then he'll be a steal of a signing for the Carolina Hurricanes if they do actually go after him. But they could use him if Pickanen is done. Hopefully not, because I'd actually like to see Brendan Morrow in a Carolina jersey. Otherwise, he'll probably go to the Montreal Canadiens. He's in their training camp right now, or was invited to their training camp. So we'll see how that goes down. Also, a new vice president has been named for the St. Louis Blues. Brett Hull, former great for the St. Louis Blues and the greatest American player of all time. Not American born, just American in general. Set so many records in the National Hockey League. He is now the new vice president for the St. Louis Blues, and it's great to have him around because he's just an absolute phenom in St. Louis, very popular player, and I like Brett Hull. I've always liked him. I think he was just a great player when he played, and I think he'll serve as a good vice president for them. Also, in other news, the Vancouver Canucks, after so many years, will finally be retiring the number 10 of Pavel Bure. So, Pavel Bure did also wear the number 96 for a couple of years, but it is his number 10 that will be retired because that is how he is most remembered. I'm honestly surprised they waited this long to retire his number. I started losing faith that they would ever retire his number. I started thinking that they were never going to retire his number, but now they are, and I'm glad they are because I think Pavel Bure, he was basically the Alex Ovechkin of the 90s and early 2000s. He was just an absolute tremendous player with the Vancouver Canucks and the Florida Panthers as well. Solid as with the New York Rangers, but by that time his career was ending because of injuries. And I'm just glad that he's finally getting his number retired by the Vancouver Canucks. He has been long overdue. Also, it seems as though on Monday at 10:45 a.m. Eastern Time, there will be a meeting that they will be hosting to announce their new captain, the New York Islanders. And we all expect that it will be center John Tavares. I think it definitely should be John Tavares. He's definitely the most deserving of it because he is definitely the best player on that team. He absolutely is. I think it's just great. Also, a couple of other signings in the Swiss League, the Swiss National Liga. Jim Vandermeer from the Vancouver Canucks and Peter Mueller of the Florida Panthers. They both signed with the Cologne Flyers of the Swiss National Liga. So 2 more NHL players going over to play in Europe. But the Canucks nor the Panthers were going to be bringing back these players anyway. Also, some AHL news, new uniforms for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, including a 15th anniversary 3rd jersey, which I think is a great move also for the organization to make, because they are indeed overdue for some new jerseys. I personally don't really watch the American Hockey League, but from what I've heard, they've been overdue for some new uniforms for a while. So I think it's a good move for the organization. And that is basically all the news in the NHL for today. Pretty soon, we're going to start covering all of the Olympic teams to hopefully try to get that done just before the regular season begins. Probably get that done during the preseason as the training camp is almost here, folks. It's almost here. In the meanwhile, we have the Traverse City Prospects tournament going on. It just started yesterday. Couple of good games, including the New York Rangers, who in the first game of the tournament lost 4-3 to the Carolina Hurricanes. So tough loss for them, despite some good power play numbers. Makes you wonder why the regular team can't have the same kind of power play numbers. But hopefully that'll change this year under Alain Vigneault. But that's basically it for today, folks. Again, I'll be back tomorrow with some more updates. And who knows, I could start my talks of the Olympic teams as soon as tomorrow, depending on if I have anything else to talk about or not. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. Okay, guys, that'll do it for episode 37 of Hockey on the Spot. I'll see you all again tomorrow. This has been Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. See you again tomorrow. Thank you, and have a great day.